Hey, welcome to this episode of Perspectives. It's such a pleasure. This is such a pleasure. I just had the most amazing conversation with this gentleman who's a really, really lovely guy. He is a self-confessed decent guy. They're his words. He is Matthew Fray, a relationship coach, a very, very successful blogger, and the author of a brand new book. It's just being released around the world, and it's called This Is How Your Marriage Ends, a hopeful approach to saving relationships. And in this story, it all began many years ago. His relationship deteriorated. He found himself divorced and he started a blog. You can go and read his blog right now. It's just fantastic. And he shared his stories of self-awareness and how he began to wake up to how perhaps he was unaware, but complicit in the relationship breaking down. And he reveals over time more and more of what he learns. And one of his blogs has now been read just on his site alone by nearly 5 million people. And that's not including, it's also, his works appeared in Huffington Post and The Atlantic and The Times in London. So he's known around the world as the guy who talks very openly about how he contributed to the breakdown of his marriage. And what he does in this book is reveal what are some of the ways it broke down, like what did he not do really, and what you can do about it. And it's a very full-on, frank conversation. There's definitely perhaps not the, would we call it political correctness? That's being a bit too harsh in it. That is perhaps the standard of today, in that research shows that when relationships are pulling apart because of one partner not contributing fully to the relationship, not showing up and distancing, 80% of the time it's men. His audience are women, but his clients are men. So we talk very much in the heteronormative sense of when your husband does and when your wife does. But it's also really masculine and feminine energy. And it's also, if we were to put it completely correctly, we'd say things like, and the person who finds themselves trying to get their partner's attention and unable to, which is a long way of saying feminine or wife. And if we're saying the other side, we'd say completely correctly, every single time we'd say, and generally, if you're the person who finds yourself not showing up, not fully engaging, and perhaps distancing, it's generally 80% of the time it's the men. So we spoke quite generally about it. And the reason we did that, I made that decision in this podcast was he's talking to men. His book is written for, as a man from a ex-husband's perspective, who found himself in this situation. He coaches men who are finding themselves in this situation. It's literally who he's speaking to. But he has a huge following around the world with women who love his message, who want their husbands to hear it. So that's a little bit of a backstory about why I really did push on him. Let's just talk with the generalizations. Our audience is mature enough to appreciate that to break down it out of heteronormative language every single time can be quite cumbersome, given it is 80% of the time I felt that the math stood up. As I said, his blog is massive. It's fantastic. He speaks passionately about what you can do to address challenges in intimate relationships. But I just find him just a terrific guy to talk to in terms of self-awareness. It's such a pleasure to speak to someone who's really owning and accounting for what they did and didn't do, how they got where they got. He's got tremendous sadness around it. The podcast doesn't even scratch, it's a long podcast, but it doesn't even scratch the surface of what the book covers. This Is How Your Marriage Ends. In the book, he talks about this story where I just cried, where his wife had just given birth. And you know what, I'm not going to tell you. You're going to need to listen to the podcast. You're going to need to read the book to know what he did next. And it's worth reading it and taking on board as much as we can, as much as our awareness invites us to, wherever we are today, with humility and with kindness and compassion to ourselves, where perhaps we are contributing to a divorce rate generally in the Western world of over 50%, over 70% of marriages are not happy. 95% of people in the Western world, probably the whole planet, but the stats I've seen are more the USA and Australia. 95% of people are married, intend to be married, or have been married. So this is something that impacts all of us. And so to have someone to come along and talk about it so honestly, I think is just wonderful. Also, I just want to thank you for listening and being part of this. You could be doing so many things right now. I just love that you want to listen to what Matt has to share about relationships and that you tune in to this podcast as often as you do. I'm so grateful. We all are so grateful to you. I love what I get to do. I love that I get to speak to these beautiful people who have interesting stories and fascinating ways to look at the world. So I'm so grateful to you, and that you show up and you want to tune in. I think it's just marvelous. Thank you so much. What you could do, if I may ask for your help, is head onto your phone and click on where the podcast app is. And if you could subscribe to Perspectives and perhaps leave a really good review, that would be wonderful. At least subscribe, because every subscription is helping us rate a little higher. As you probably know, we have hundreds of thousands, sometimes over 1 million viewers per episode, but it's not showing up where it gets measured. And obviously, if it gets measured, our voice and our message gets to more people like you. We would love that. And also, if you love it, share it. That'd be wonderful. But really, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I really trust you enjoy it. I look forward to your feedback. So one of the things that drew me to your work was your heart. You put it all out there, darling. You let it all hang out there. Well, I don't know if you did put it all out there, but you certainly put enough out there for me to cry at some sections in your book. I bawled my eyes out. I'll tell you later what that section was, but you really gave it, I believe, the best shot you could give to be as true to how you've now perceived what happened as possible. And I honor you for that.
Thank you very much, because that, right, it's the inaccurate understanding or explanation for why relationship breakdowns occur, this sort of fundamental misunderstanding about it. That's sort of the best word I think I have. I think the vast majority of relationship fights, marriage breakups, are boiled down to one word: a misunderstanding. Yeah. And there's all sorts of like things to unpack and that, but right, yes. The mission is, can you make it clearer? Can you translate effectively between the two individuals? And if you can succeed in doing that, will those two people show up more effectively for each other? I think so. Most of the time I do. Yeah.
I think my compliment went past you, so I'm going to say it again, because I really want you to hear how honored I am by reading your book.
Thank you. I'll try hard. I'm bad at compliments. Thank you.
Yeah. I just watched you dodge it.
Sorry. I'm going to take it in, I promise.
Yeah. You honored anybody who's experienced that by being so open and heart-led by your own epiphanies, your own awakening to your role in what had happened in your divorce, in your losing your marriage. And you were heartfelt about it, and in some ways so blunt about yourself. And I found it so raw and visceral at parts, and it really touched me. And that's why I wanted to speak with you, because you really brought you to the page, and that is huge.
Thank you. I've tried really hard. And so, yes. Yeah. So on a personal level, as you know, my parents split when I was 4. Yeah. And it was the second most significant thing that ever happened to me. And then my marriage ended when I was 33, almost 34. And that was the most significant thing that happened to me. Both were painful in their own unique ways, and they have defined my life. Yeah. And then I just from I don't know if creativity is the right word, but just from I guess a content creation standpoint, I believe very strongly in, I can't do this work effectively if I don't lead with like vulnerability and authenticity. Those sound like such buzzwords and cliche, and I don't want them to, because I mean them in the most literal sense of those two words. And I'm happy to, I think what I've discovered is that if I go first, meaning in a coaching conversation, very specifically, that I'm talking to a lot of men sometimes that I think are uncomfortable or not used to sharing the most uncomfortably true parts of the things they think and feel with particularly just some random stranger. But if I go first, they'll do it. Not always, but often. And I try to I don't know, I try to provide, for lack of a better term, a safe environment for that to occur.
Yeah. I think
anyway, I'm willing to do that with lots of people. I'm done hiding.
Yeah, good for you. I really want to talk with you. I'm going to try to remember you said that, because that's because talking about men's shame down the track. Let's warm into that big topic. But could you, for those of our viewers who aren't familiar with your work, the book that you've written is wonderful. This Is How Your Marriage Ends. And I have read your book twice, once again today. Could you introduce yourself to our viewers to get a sense of how you came to write a book called This Is How Your Marriage Ends?
Can do my best. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I'm 43 today, and not literally today, but I'm 43 as of right now. And my marriage ended 9 years ago, and it was the single most difficult, traumatic moment of my life. And I always want to sort of caveat that with, I understand there's a lot of people out there that have endured greater traumas than a marriage ending, but our personal experiences are our personal experiences. And so relative to my somewhat non-resilient life, this was the most difficult thing I'd encountered. I'd never experienced something more painful, more dark, more whatever. And a lot of that might have to do with the fact that when I was 4, my parents split, and they lived, and forgive me, I'm so embarrassed. I don't remember if you guys use miles or if you guys use kilometers.
The show goes all around the world. In Australia, it's kilometers, but rock on.
I don't know the the conversion with kilometers, but it's about 500 miles and between where my parents lived. And so I'd go months without seeing, usually my father, who I only saw on my school breaks a couple of times a year for an extended period of time. But it was still, as a child, an exceedingly difficult thing. And I think I carried that into the divorce process. I think my marriage ending brought up all sorts of uncomfortable thoughts and feelings about those childhood memories and experiences. And then the sort of poetic part of it in an uncomfortable way was my son was literally almost to the week the same age I was when my parents ended. And I thought that was a very interesting observation, and I couldn't help but not notice, I had to notice that. Anyway, that was it. I spent the last 9 years writing for public consumption on the internet because I needed to process the divorce. I needed to process this worst thing that ever happened to me. And I accidentally sort of grew. I didn't set out to do anything necessarily positive in the world. I didn't set out certainly to cultivate an audience. And I promise you, I didn't set out to work in the marriage, divorce, relationship space in any capacity. But the natural evolution of 9 years of blogging on the internet was an audience formed, a coaching business, advising people, often men, emerged. And then eventually that led to media coverage and offers to write books and make television and things like that. And that's all happening as we speak. And yes, the book just came out in North America in March. It came out in the UK a week later, and it's set officially for an Australian release in June of 2022.
Yes,
so that'll be great.
Yeah, this podcast is going to come out perfectly in time for that launch. And thank you for the media release of it. One of the things that there were many things that touched me in the book. I've got Post-it notes all the way through it. But one of the things that touched me was your awareness around how the marriage was fading over the years. But if you looked outside in, you'd think it was one event. It was your wife losing her father.
Yes.
And you deciding, I'll let you fill in the blanks there. But you could see the dichotomy. You could see there were two stories here. There were probably multiple layers of stories, but it's not just simply this one event shattered the marriage. If you wouldn't mind sharing that. And to anyone listening, This Is How Your Marriage Ends is a book worth reading. So as much as we're going to have a deep dive with Matt, and we're really honored for that, it's still worth turning the pages and having his story. It's very worth that. Please.
Oh, thank you. I want to emphasize that I think this is more or less the condition in the vast majority of relationships, the vast majority of marriages. The details will change, but I think thematically it's the same. And so what happened in my personal life, in my marriage, was a couple of years before our divorce, we lost my wife's father out of nowhere. It was really, really shocking. And it was really, really traumatic for her. And that represented the turning point in how my wife had been showing up in the relationship. Her personality changed, the way she treated me changed, the way she received just everything about her and I's interactions changed that day. And I think a very rational, logical conclusion from that a lot of people might take away is my wife's trauma and grief and shock of losing her father affected her to the point where she was no longer participating effectively in a marriage. That was truly how I thought about it. And I thought of my father-in-law's passing as the event that caused the downfall of my relationship.
Yeah.
And of course, what I've later learned, and what I believe is the story of the vast majority of relationships, is that we erode trust in ways that we don't always notice, very slowly, incrementally, in our blind spots, through a series of very, very small infractions that any one of the isolated incidents could be easily dismissed as something that's not particularly harmful, something that's not dangerous enough, not painful enough to worry about. And because it's not dangerous enough to worry about, or to fix, or to, just to be mindful of not doing anymore, because it just seems so inconsequential, we allow these minor infractions to just pile up over the weeks and the months and the years. And it is my belief that erodes feelings of safety and trust in relationships. And that then when a major trauma occurs, and it can be all sorts of things, it can show up as infidelity, it can show up as a death, it can show up as like a health diagnosis, job loss, anything like that. Just a major event can you don't have the strength and stability in the foundation to withstand that as a relationship, as a couple, because you're fractured by the previous 5, 10, 15 years of just being what I often refer to as being paper cut to death.
Yeah.
Right. That it's not one event. It's not, I talk about it as nothing dramatic, like a bomb explosion or a gunshot, that it's bleeding out very slowly from 10,000 paper cuts, is the metaphor, the analogy that sort of works for me, that makes me see it, I think, more clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a massive community, tens of thousands of members around the world. 75 to 80% would be women, and 75 to 80% of those women would say, how can I help my marriage? He doesn't seem engaged.
Right.
They're the numbers. And it's been that way since I began 20 years ago. The Gottman Institute, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this research, in relationships that are heteronormative, but also where there's masculine and feminine energy, so it's across contextual in terms of relationships, the avoidant distancing partner 80% of the time is the man. And I've heard all your podcasts now, and the number of times you're interviewed, and there's this massive effort put on you to say, but we're not meaning, we don't, it happens to everyone. And there's this almost embarrassed need to cover up. But can we just speak frankly? Men do it 80%, women do it 20%. That's a massive imbalance in the emotional load and luggage of the relationship. What you're describing happened in your marriage where you didn't show up, and we'll go into that hopefully. 50% of marriages end, 75% of them or more are miserable. 70% of the time it's women that file for divorce. 70% of the time men don't know what happened. These are unbelievable, huge stats to say it's men that need to listen to this, but it's women who keep showing up for this conversation.
That's correct.
Come on.
Everything you just said is identical to my experiences. Yeah. And I think, as you know, I don't get a ton of criticism, to be fair. I think that I'm very blessed that I don't get a ton of blowback and negative feedback.
No,
but
you don't.
But what I do get is from a small subsect of men that feel really offended by what they perceive to be the framing that I'm blaming them.
No.
That I'm saying that men are at fault for bad relationships, and that it's 100% incumbent on men to do things differently in order for relationships to succeed. And I promise that I don't believe that. I believe in this almost accidental way, in this way that it's not biological. I think it's cultural. I think it's societal.
Cultural. Yep.
I think boys have been raised in a way that is not bad. And I just can't emphasize that idea enough. It doesn't make people evil or bad. No. But I think the accidental math result of their behavior can harm relationships because they lack certain awareness and skills that are useful for trust and safety to exist in a relationship with somebody that you've promised to love. And to me, that's the story. It's how did I come to these conclusions? I made it about me. I had to solve the mystery of how me, somebody I truly thought was like well-intentioned, reasonably intelligent, genuinely loves my wife, authentically desired to stay together forever. How is it that I participated so effectively in my marriage's downfall? And I had to piece that together. And it took me a few years, but I think I landed on that.
Yes.
I was not a bad person. And I was conflating the idea that I thought a good human who behaved decently with the best of intentions was automatically a good relationship partner. And it's simply not true. In the same way, an amazing human being, right, isn't necessarily a great architect or a great government official or a great anything.
That's it. Yeah. And culturally, generally, women are raised to be relationally stronger and to be the emotional baggage carriers. And that's unfortunate. And what you're doing is saying, hey, let's shake this up and stop expecting women to do the emotional carrying 80% of the time. And let's look for how we, all of us here, can start changing these expectations that culturally have all been placed upon all of us. I know that as equally as the huge majority of this happens where men don't show up, a huge majority of women overfunction, overgive emotionally, carry all the loads, think it's how it's meant to be, consider themselves a good person, a good woman, and a good wife if they do all the emotional carrying and don't think to ever question it. That I see that a massive amount as well. And it's almost like when I say, do you have to carry all this? Well, everything would fall down if I didn't. And I'm like, well, we both participated in creating this drama where if you stopped carrying all the load, it would fall down. And also the guy generally has created this, also participate in the drama by letting them carry all the load because they don't know how to be competent at it. And the woman never wants to let go because they fear the incompetence, but they never let them get competent. And so it goes and it goes and it goes. And this is really hard. And I can see both parts.
Me too.
What I am going to call out, and it's whoever isn't showing up. The person who's carrying all the load is tired. The person who is doing all the lifting, be it the man, the female, whatever gender description you use, is exhausted, is filled with self-doubt, has self-esteem falling, has issues around self-worth linked to if I stop, do they not even care about me? They are questioning the level of commitment and care that you have towards them. So as much as I've equaled out where responsibility lies, wake up, because the problem you're describing, that's the experience of this person when you don't show up. They feel demoralized, sad, alone. They feel abandoned. They feel that they've been lied to when it came to coming into the marriage or the relationship. They are filled with self-doubt that it'll ever get any better. And the thing you say the best, and I hope I find the quote, is if you keep doing it the same way, what you're promising them is it will never get better.
Yeah.
And that is so devastating.
That was, I don't know if we're going to deeper dive on these ideas, but to me, the low-hanging fruit concepts for men to consider, if we're going to talk about this like statistical norm, is we do things, we leave, the way I like to talk about it is we leave evidence that we're going to do the things we want to do with no regard, no consideration for how it will be experienced by our partner. And my sort of famous, if you will, air quotes, example is the conversation around the dish by the sink, which happy to get into later, but right, it's I think it's fine there. She doesn't think it's fine there. Two people want to have an argument about whose preferences should win. And the way that I think about it in the context of relationship health is when I leave that there, I'm leaving evidence that I'll always choose me over her.
Yeah.
And I don't think the absence of it tells the same story in reverse. I just don't. And we could have an intellectual fairness debate because a lot of men get really defensive about this and they come back at me.
Yeah.
And they say,
let's do it.
Your feelings should matter as much as your wife's does.
Yeah,
well, and
I'm all in.
It segues from what you just talked about, in my estimation, is regardless of gender, but again, the vast majority of the time, it's women in heteronormative relationships. They're experiencing hardship, pain. They're experiencing very bad things, and their male partners are not. Meaning,
that's it.
The dish by the sink, even though guy listening to this might not necessarily fully grasp this idea yet, hurts my wife because not because the dish is there, not because it's hard to put in the dishwasher, not even because it's hard to scrub out. It's hard because it's evidence that I'm married to somebody that no matter how many times we've had this conversation, insists on doing things in a manner that is bad for me and good for him. He's simply not in any way, shape, or form considering. And if he is, he's choosing to do it on purpose anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, the worst case scenario is he does it and he truly doesn't care about me. He does not care. And the best case scenario is he doesn't think about me at all. The best case is he's oblivious to my needs, even though I've said it 400 times.
Even though I've said it 2,000 times. Even though again, guys, for viewers, can we just be mature? We're going to stop saying the word generally. We've established the gender stats on this. Go to the Gottman Institute, look it up. It's all there. So when the man comes home and leaves the glass on the sink, it's not about the glass on the sink. It's, as you say, it hurts her because now she's the one who has to clean up after him. He has infantilized himself, which you didn't talk about in the book, but I believe there's a level of also infantilizing yourself when you repeatedly have a woman play the role of mother, which you do cover later in the book. Don't turn your wife into the mother.
Yeah.
There's that aspect. So she is now in the position, and this is where this dynamic of the woman has to do everything. I now have to caretake him. I am forced to overfunction. I'm forced to think about things he's refusing to think about. What else isn't he thinking about that I now need to add to my list? And for a woman, if you're listening to this, that creates unsafety in the woman.
Anxiety.
It is destabilizing. It is anxiety causing. It shakes our foundations because we're trying to build a nest. Like I don't have children, but I equate, for me, it's about building a nest. And I need my dragon slayer in the nest with me. And I need to have the moats around me. But if the dragon's in there doing the things that the dragon slayer is meant to stop, I'm not safe anymore. So it was never about the dish. It's about where don't I feel safe in my nest?
And to me, I just think such an important component of it is our sort of capacity for like predictive analysis. If this has been the condition for the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, this projects to continue and or get worse. And so I have to worry about, what if I get a health diagnosis? What if we run into financial uncertainty? Are we going to be safe in retirement someday? Are we going to have all of these things? You have to start projecting. This is the evidence I have to date. And we haven't even got to the part where we can't have successful conversations about it. Like we can't even, it's a non-starter with men who have the invalidation habit that I had in my relationship. It's a nasty cycle. And I think the scariest part is, to the average human, I don't think it sounds nearly as dangerous as I think it actually is to relationships.
It's massively destabilizing. The stats speak for it. 70% of relationships are ending divorce or just in misery. But here's the other thing that happens. There's plenty of research showing that in this dynamic, we're going to unpack all this dynamic. I just adore conversations about this. It's my favorite thing. When we do this, when we create this destabilization, this lack of trust, the sad thing is the partner that's having it done to them, let's just say the female for the sake of convenience, the woman is stuck nagging, which feels horrible, ignoring it, which feels she's abandoning herself and not living in integrity, being defeated about it and giving up, which means she starts to lose and swallow her soul and become smaller to accommodate his selfishness, or she gets really hugely angry and turns into the ogre he was afraid she'd be, and now he gets justified and even more defensive because she's finally lost her shit, or she leaves. They're the options. None of these options are soul edifying. None of them are helping me feel inspired or to grow or to feel passionate about the person. And respect will erode. And as you write, trust erodes. So if they're my options, by repeatedly doing the same thing that hurts me, as you say in the book, you're making a really good case as to why I should leave.
I really thought I was the victim of my wife like quitting on me when she left. I really honestly interpreted it as she's quitting. She's selfish. She's doing this to me. And the most valuable work I've ever done is go from that to, oh my God, she had to. She had to in order to be a healthy human being that could just sleep at night, literally, and look herself in the mirror and feel like some sense of respect. And I think most poignantly, to be a good mother to my son, to be a healthy, present, mindful, intentional mother to our son. She had to live a life of like health and authenticity, and it required ending our relationship, and I left her no option. I truly believe that is the story of our relationship. And I'm so proud, frankly, that I came to that conclusion, that I didn't stay in the woe is me mindset. And the truth is, if we didn't have a child, if we didn't share a son, I really believe there's a chance I'd be drinking 3 times more than I do now in some pub in some faraway city. I would have never talked to her again, and I'd still be telling woe is me tales about how my wife left me because, you know, her father passed and it was really sad, but she couldn't handle it. I really think there's a chance I might have done that. And so I'm really glad that it's more uncomfortable to be me today than it was, right?
Yes.
To be the oblivious, comfortable, infantile, if you will, sort of husband, you know, of like 12, 15 years ago. That's a better way to live, feels better. But it's like, right, it's like not knowing you have a health condition. It feels better because you're not stressed and anxious about it. But is it really better if it's threatening you like long term? Everybody gets to decide for themselves.
Yeah, and you did. And I love that. So we painted this scenario of what choices the woman is left with. And just for the viewers who are listening, thinking, oh, wow, maybe I am the person who would leave the dish by the sink, or whatever that metaphor is for you. I hope we've really communicated that is what's happening for the person it's happening to. If it matters to them and they've brought it to you repeatedly over and over, they are communicating hurt, and they're giving you an invitation to help them and to cooperate, as you say in your book. They're inviting you to cooperate with managing, repairing, and alleviating that hurt and preventing it happen in the future. So if you've got your woman going at your nuts, I say it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. You are lucky they're going nuts at you, because silence means they've left.
They're fighting for you. Like
they're
fighting because they
love.
Want you to be together. Yes. It's critical.
Yeah. The yelling, I know this is so hard to believe, is a good sign. It actually, they've tried saying respectfully. So they've done this. You know what, honey, I would just love it if you could possibly consider putting that cup in the dishwasher. It would mean the world to me. They've done that 30 times. You just didn't hear them because it didn't matter to you. Not you, but I'm talking to the men who are viewing this. Then they went to this scale. Honey, you know, I did ask you a number of times, I really need that cup put in this. I really do need it. Why is she so grouchy? Now it's starting to be heard, but you don't hear the niceness. You didn't hear the 30 other times. And then it's for sake, what does it take for you to get, I need you to put that in there, and you turn into this ogre, this mother hell witch, do that, and you can see yourself doing it, and the guy's looking at you going, what is up with you? You've lost it. And they start.
I didn't know I moved back in with my mother, he says.
Yes. Yeah. And now the retreat's begun, but you didn't hear the 30 times when she came knocking and said, honey, we're in this together. This is how we're in it together. So she's still yelling, guys, there's still a chance.
Yeah.
There really is.
I don't want to, you get to dictate this conversation, but I would love to discuss what I think the biggest wall to like that understanding is this invalidation pattern that I think so many guys have. Okay. Yeah,
we are going to unpack. I
really want men to think about.
I loved your, I'm hugging your media version of your book, your triple devalidation strategy. We're going to do that. But what I'm doing right now is setting up for the viewers, anyone who should be listening to this, it's not the person who's on the receiving end of being ignored. The person who needs to hear this is the person who does the ignoring. And I'm saying to you, if you have been yelled at, probably by your wife, about the same thing, what we're about to discuss is you. You might not like it. You might not agree with it. You might think she should just stop yelling. And you might even be saying to yourself, why is she so upset about such little things? But we're getting there. This is those little things Matt describes as the 1,000 paper cuts until your marriage is gone. That made me cry when you said that.
That to me is the story of the vast majority of marriages that end. I wish I had data to prove it.
When we are obstacles to our partner's pursuit of their own needs, or when we neglect to fulfill any needs that fall to us as their partners, we are complicit in their decisions to pursue these needs elsewhere. That's how I want to sum up what we just described. You say it in the book, it's page 68. We are complicit in their decision to leave if we repeatedly ignore their needs. And so where I want to get you to now, Matt, is talking about the need for safety. And then we're going to get to the validation piece, because to me it builds why is that what is safety and why is it so important, and then we'll start talking about how we mess it up.
Well, and my favorite way to talk about safety is to think of Maslow's hierarchy, which is, I think a lot of people are familiar with it because they learned about it in some level of school. And if you're not familiar with it, I strongly encourage you to do a quick Google search of it. It's called Maslow, M-A-S-L-O-W. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist. And back in the 1940s, he introduced a model that is frequently visually depicted in pyramid form that shows the 5 levels of human needs. And my favorite thing that I learned about that model was that you have to satisfy the conditions of each level before, we fulfill level 1, basic needs, food, water, air, shelter.
Yep.
And then we move up, and the next thing humans need is safety. And what I think significant in the context of relationships, because I use Maslow's model because I think it's so useful to think about within your relationships, that if you have not satisfied safety needs within the relationship, then all of these higher needs, these esteem needs, these belonging needs, these togetherness needs that people often pursue in the form of physical intimacy and having a good time together and things like that, they fall by the way. Giving gifts, those things don't work very well for relationships in which safety doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men, they give a gift, or they pursue their wife or their girlfriend intimately, or their romantic partner intimately. They, essentially make a bid to have sex. And then that gets rebuffed or rejected. And they're like, wow, this person's rejecting my gifts. They don't want to go, have a date night with me. They don't want to do anything. And it feels like rejection, when what it actually is the condition of safety hasn't been met in the relationship.
Yes.
And I believe so strongly the condition of safety goes away because of seemingly benign things like a dish by the sink. I just really think something that quote unquote minuscule is what piles up to eliminate the condition of safety and trust in the relationship. And so I just would like to begin with that framework that I want somebody to know where I'm coming from, that I think trust is so critical. The number one thing a relationship needs for longevity. It's my belief. And I welcome correction from anybody who says there's actually a condition that matters more. I just think trust is so critical. And I think it is essentially intertwined with safety. We trust because we're safe. We trust them because they're quote unquote safe, like to us.
So let's talk about what safety is, because you don't just mean physical safety. Talk about emotional safety, because I think this is the whole game in relationships. The whole game. No. We fall apart or we hold together based on what we're about to talk about. This is it.
And we're going to get into the conversation pattern that I believe breaks it down. It's such a roadblock, but the first thing that occurs in my work that I talk about with like a coaching client is this idea we talked about a little bit earlier with the dish is of consideration. It's just the best word I have for it. And it came from me asking people, but I said, what is the biggest problem in your relationship? I just threw that out on like Facebook one day, like years ago. And then I created like a small spreadsheet, keeping track of the answers. I was so curious of what the biggest pain points in relationships were. And the number one answer, and I was shocked to see it, I didn't see it coming, was I want to feel considered by my husband or by my partner. And I'm like, wow, I'm not even quite sure I know what that means. This was, again, like 3-4 years ago. So I started asking people and it came together like really quickly for me. And at the danger of repeating myself, the way that I think about it today is frequently, and please forgive me for my sort of elementary like math analogies that I do all the time. It's the only way it works like for my brain.
It works.
Is the average wife and mother I encounter in my work, right, is married with a couple kids on average. And this is how she thinks about the concept of consideration, which I think is so critical for safety to exist. Is I am a variable in the, if you will, the algebraic math equation I use to make decisions. I think about me, I think about my needs all the time. My husband is a variable in the math equation I use. My children, each of them, however many I have, my pets, they are all variables that I am constantly accounting for, calculating for, evaluating. I figure out I need this. I really want to emphasize this. This exists on these, maybe these, what might seem subtle to some people, like dietary needs, clothing preferences, where people like to go on vacation. If I have a child who's allergic to ultraviolet light, maybe my vacation is not going to be to this really, really sunny beach environment. Maybe instead the family's going to go somewhere like where I live, where it's infinitely more cloudy.
My husband's worry about his job or a problem he's having with one of the colleagues. Emotional concerns.
Every possible thing I can do to account for the well-being, for the experience that my relationship partner and that my children might have. I also like to talk about the busy mom who's like a working professional, and she's even thinking about when to schedule, like to get her hair done or her nails done around her husband's work schedule and around her children's like extracurricular activities, because I don't want to necessarily like have my kids like hanging. At minimum, they'll accommodate for it by getting another parent to drive them home or something. Like they're constantly calculating for all the people in their life. And then boom, decisions made, having calculated for everybody. And this woman, this composite human being, this avatar, if you will, of so many millions of people in the world, are married to somebody, frequently a man in heterosexual relationships, almost often a man. And she experiences as he's the only variable in the math equation he uses to make decisions. Not all the time, not constantly, but just often enough to be problematic, to indicate he didn't think about her. He didn't think necessarily about his children and the impact some choice he might have made would have on them. And then, so the math result of that is the best case scenario is it's my husband's a good man. He's a good father. He loves me. He just makes decisions absent considering me, considering us in some of these choices. He like forgets, it seems like. So the best case scenario is My husband's constantly calculating for me, his wife, and his family's needs, and he's making decisions that trickle down and result in some semblance of harm to us anyway, because he doesn't care. That's the worst thing that could be true. And the best possible thing that can be true is that he doesn't think about me at all. That huge swaths of his day are spent failing to even include me. That's how little I rank on his constant daily priority list. I'm not number one. I'm not number two. I'm not even number five. He wouldn't forget to tell his boss that he was stepping out. He wouldn't forget to tell his work partner that he was doing X, Y, and Z. But I am constantly like left behind, not remembered, not included. And I just think that is so painful. And that creates this absence of safety people require to exist comfortably in a relationship, to calculate that tomorrow is going to be okay. The next week, next month, the next year is going to be okay. And I really want people that might sort of fail to calculate for the people they love to really take seriously the mission of doing that.
And then it can be even more subtle. It can be that they, excuse me, they look like they're taking into account. So they ask you about it and there seems to be an agreement, and then they forget the agreement a week later and you're back to having to nag them. And it's like, so it looks like, oh, they can consider me. And there's this feeling of hope. And then a week later, a month later, the bad habits are back again and you're back to having to remind them and remind them. It's like, so they just get taught. We just get taught. Unless we're nagging and reminding and doing all of this, they won't lift. I call it lifting your end of the emotional log. Yeah. And if you're not lifting your end of the emotional log, I've got a log on my shoulders, and why am I carrying the whole log? And what happens if I drop the log, Matt? That's the thing that's terrifying to a woman with a family. I can't afford to drop the log, but it seems that he can. He seems to be able to with impunity.
Yeah. And then feels offended when it's suggested that he's not doing enough.
Yeah.
My favorite analogy with consideration that I've recently started talking about, because of how I don't know why, it just really hits me, because it's something I would have done, is why.
Okay.
I like to imagine at dinner on Monday, wife and mother asks her husband, hey, can you be home with the kids Thursday night? I got to disappear because I have to prepare for this big business presentation I have to give on Friday. Yeah. And he says, of course, no problem. He thinks about Thursday coming up in a few days. Like, that's not a problem. I'll be here. And then it's a few days. Thursday rolls around. A couple people from like a client, he works for a business, and some sort of out of towners come in. Let's say 2 guys from Germany fly into town. And it's like, we're going to take these guys out for dinner and drinks after, the close of business today. And so he texts his wife, or even calls her and says, hey, a couple guys from, the German branch showed up. We're going out. And suddenly she's mad. And he's like, good God. He's like, I'm really sorry. I just forgot. Here's my favorite part of this example. He can realize his mistake and say, oh my gosh, I'm really sorry. You're absolutely right. I did promise you that. He excuses himself. He doesn't even go out to the dinner and the drinks. He comes home. But when I'm talking to clients and I go through this example, I'm like, listen, your wife still got everything logistically that she wanted. Everything she wanted, she got. And you still eroded trust. You still failed to calculate for how, like, being thoughtless and not considering your wife, you still damaged it, even though she got everything she wanted. And so many men get hung up on, so many people get hung up on, this person got what they wanted. Why are they angry with me? Why are they upset? And it's like, that's not it. Again, it's not the dish. It is this failure to calculate. It's like, she didn't matter enough for you to make damn sure you'd blocked out that time at the end of the workday. You didn't treat it as important as you treated a random dinner and drinks with some guys from out of town.
A blow-in was more important.
And so what I love is thinking about how our spouse still gets exactly what they want, exactly what they quote unquote need, but you still caused trust erosion. Yeah. And it just, that's the metric that I really want people to calculate for, these moments where we communicate, you didn't matter to me as much as I mattered to me. And that is not as selfish and narcissistic and sociopathic as it might sound. it's not relevant what our intentions are. What matters is what happens on the other side of the equal sign after we say and do things. And no matter how decent I am, and no matter how much I love my wife, no matter how well-intentioned I am, the other side of the equal sign can still equal harm and trust erosion. And learning that and learning how to be accountable for it and accept responsibility for it, being willing to accept that mantle of I'm going to be responsible for how even accidental things I do result in harm for someone else, and then mitigate it so that they can trust me that it's not going to be a thing that happens over and over again, is the greatest life change I've made in my interpersonal relationships. And it's not close.
You talk about responsibility. Something I find very tiresome is people saying to me, you know what, I take responsibility for that. And that's it. And I'm like,
that's not what that is.
You're not 6. That's not taking responsibility. Please talk and address this so there is no misunderstandings what it means and why saying, you know what, my bad. Why that is a crappy thing to say to someone. My bad. You're right. That's on me. That is appalling. Over to you. Have at it.
I don't mean to laugh. I'm really sorry, but I hear it. I hear the guy, how I probably said something like it. The truth is my apologies probably sounded even a little bit more genuine than that. But the truth is I would like outright refuse to apologize. She would ask me, she's like, would you please apologize? And I'm like, I didn't intend to hurt you.
Okay, we'll do intention first, then we'll come to responsibility, because this is my other big thing that you speak about. I'm passionate about this. Here it is for everyone watching. If you think you might be on the I might be a little bit problematic in some of my relationships side of the equation, here it is. Intention does not equal experience. Intention does not equal experience. You can have the best intentions in the world. You may love your wife completely. You feel devoted through and through to your very soul. The thought of ever deliberately hurting her, you would sooner die than deliberately hurt this beautiful woman who you consider your goddess. Your intentions have got nothing to do with her experience. No matter how much you think your intention should count, if you're not calculating for her experience, you are not understanding your wife. And she is invisible to you. She is not seen by you. She is not heard by you. She's not understood by you. And she feels like she doesn't matter. No matter how good a person you are, no matter how many friends you have, no matter how much you love her, and the fact you will die loving this woman, your intentions do not equal her experience. They can't. Now, but I'm still going to ask you to resist getting into the tripred validation, because I just think that's such a wonderful piece. Can you speak to that equation, how you talk about the maths of that? Because I love this.
I think it's so critical, and I think it kind of goes back to one of my favorite ideas that's ridiculously simple, but I think a lot of people have told me it was really impactful for them. And it's the idea that good people can be bad spouses. And it originated as good men can be bad husbands. Because I was so focused on that idea, like early in my writing. You don't need to explain
that. That's your
experience.
I
know. I don't. I'm sorry.
It's your experience. Don't you need to apologize. I don't want you to apologize for that. It's your experience. Okay. You coach men who do this pattern. You don't tend to coach women. You do you. Go for it.
Fair enough. I think it's a powerful idea. Good men can be bad husbands. And one of my favorite ways to talk about it is talking about how incredible my grandmother is. Yeah. Like, I think that she is the sweetest, kindest, most wonderful human I've ever encountered. She is she's so sweet to like every human she'd ever encounter under any circumstances. But it's so important to think about like accepting responsibility for skill building in relationships. Despite her impeccable character, in my estimation, she's not somebody you'd want to contract to like build a bridge, to span a river, or to build a skyscraper, to pilot an aircraft. She would not do that very well. I don't imagine. Bad things would ensue. And I want people to consider that how amazing of a human being they are has no bearing on the degree to which they successfully execute something they're trying to do. You being awesome doesn't make you great at being a relationship partner. And one of my blind spots in my marriage was this notion of knowledge and skill building practice being relevant to developing relational skills. I did not ever think about relationship. And this is where I put the onus. I don't mean to pass the buck, I promise you, because I accepted the responsibility today for my son. But I think previous generations did children a disservice that we've continued to inherit through the generations, where we do not arm, by and large, I don't think, young boys with the value of, please work on developing relational skills. They're very important to existing in the world and succeeding in life, because these don't just apply to our romantic relationships, they apply to all of our relationships.
Yes.
As a father, as a friend, as a professional, they're so critical. And but what I think boys learn and men learn is that we can get by without these skills in every facet of our lives, except for our closest interpersonal relationships. We tend to only suffer in marriage and parenting when we lack these skills, which you learn later, and then you blame the other people. And again, I defend men. I don't mean
that's it.
I don't mean defend them.
This is good. No, this is good.
Yeah, but I want guys to think about this.
Say that again. That just clicked for me.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Men are rewarded everywhere else for being blunt and to the point and didn't consider it, and the whole power patriarchy we can do. But it's only with your marriage you're getting a hard time. So you think, well, it's got to be them. If
they're the statistical outlier. So if you think in terms of like stats and data and analysis, we at math, I don't want to say we, I'm not a mathematician, but scientists and mathematicians can safely dismiss outliers and still get reliable data samples.
Yeah.
And I think that's like what a lot of people automatically do. This is the only person who says these things about me.
Yes.
Everyone else likes me. Everyone else thinks I'm great. So I dismiss as an outlier. So I like to defend the guys in the context of, I think it's sensible for them to draw this conclusion in the absence of critical information that I think most young men are not raised with. That they just miss the relational skills.
I'm going to be a little harsher than that. And I'm going to say, if she's hurting, honey, and she's in tears, wake the fuck up.
Oh, please. It's so bad. Yeah.
If she's in tears and you think she's wrong, stop. Your wife is in tears because of something you don't think you've done, but it doesn't matter. She's gutted. Whatever you think you can justify, however good a bloke you are at the pub and with your colleagues and your friends, she's gutted. She's on the floor in tears. Whatever you are telling yourself, you're heading for this. Unless you're with her, down in the pit with her, you climb down into that pit with her. And we're going to talk about how you do that. Otherwise, you're losing her. Because every time you think she's wrong, she learns not to trust you.
I don't want to characterize my son's mother as being somebody that was always crying. I think she did early, though. And I think it evolved into anger. And I respond more favorably to
I wasn't talking about
anger.
Your relationship.
No, but I make everything about that because I need to own it. I need to own it. And then this is part of it, though. This is part of it, because if there's any guys that feel a little bit defensive and a little bit like put on the spot, I want them to understand that that was me, that I've left my wife huddled on the floor. Like I have done that. I've been that person. And it's not maybe as awful. It is as awful as it sounds, but I don't want to make it sound as harsh as it sounds. It wasn't this like domineering, it was like, I don't know what to even do with you.
You had
and
no idea.
I would just walk away because I'm like, I don't know how to fix this.
No.
And I felt so helpless, but also frustrated and a little bit angry, and I didn't get it. I'm like, why is this thing such a big deal to you? It seems so inconsequential. And then also like efforts to communicate how inconsequential I thought it to be, obviously fell on deaf ears, and she would just kind of melt occasionally early in our early 20s. She just didn't know how to deal with it. And I was like, I don't know what to do now.
What a mess.
When you talked about that, I mean, that was me. And so I want like guys hearing it to know I was the same guy, and now I'm not the same guy.
No.
And to whatever extent one craves developing relational skills, I really would like them to believe that it's a very doable thing, that it's not some mystic, it's not a mystic art. It is just a little bit of work consistently.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what we can do. Your book outlines so many ways we can turn this around. So we did intentionality isn't experience. I also want to touch now, did we do responsibility? And then we'll get to the tripartite that you talk about, how we not validate people. Because I just think my favorite work when I work with my clients all around the world, Matt, is I believe my superpower, and what I'm told my superpower is the ability to have a person feel seen, heard, understood, and validated. There is a felt sense of being felt. I will be with them. I will cry with them. I empathize with them. I'm down in there with them. That is a skill that I never had. It is a skill. So we're going to unpack that. So anyone who's listening is thinking, I probably have some of these problems in my relationship. We're going to unpack exactly what those skills are. But can we just talk a little bit about responsibility? It's not about blame. None of what we're discussing, and I know I discuss this with a lot of passion, is about blame. It's about awareness. How did you become aware? Too late, granted. And I feel for you, and I feel for your family and what it's cost you. I really do.
Yeah, thank you. How did I become aware? I mean, that's
because
a really good question.
This sentence, this is where we didn't keep going. I hear people say, my bad, you're right, that's on me, or you're dead right, I got that wrong, I'm responsible. But they don't do anything after that. You have done stacks after I'm responsible. How did you learn there was more to do other than say, yeah, I'm responsible?
No one's asked me that before. I don't know that I have a clean answer, because this has been such incremental. The growth has been incremental. As awareness has increased and I've evolved, it would have come from the realization that safety and trust are so critical to my relationship. I don't get to have a relationship anymore. And the person that I'm speaking words and feeling feelings of love for will not experience love in the absence of safety and trust, no matter how much I want them to. That realization led me to apologies. Essentially, this idea of accepting responsibility can't just be this momentary place and time. It can't be empty words. Essentially, I'm sorry I hit you. I don't mean to imply. I'm thinking about two kids on the playground. I'm not thinking about relationship partners, because goodness, and not physical abuse was not a thing and should never be. But like two kids, they're 7 and they fight while playing, some sport on the playground. And then the teacher makes, I'm sorry I hit you, is and then boom, it's over in the context of the playground disagreement. That applied to the relationship. I guess I thought of apologies as this polite thing that you did, that you said, that was manners. But I always thought sort of it didn't mean anything. The work is after.
You're missing a step here.
Yeah.
Something happened, because you didn't just jump from apology has to be more, safety is how they stay loving. How did you get to safety is how they feel loved? That's the awareness piece.
Yeah. My best guess is feedback. My best guess, that the hack that I had that the average man doesn't have, is I had copious amounts of feedback from stories I was sharing. And I have to own that
you did,
sort of
but
blessing.
Plenty of people have had lots of feedback and not woken up at all. So I don't think we're going to solve it. There is something there, because I woke up when it came to validation. I've become masterful at it because it's something I've dedicated 20 years to. This is a skill that is a gift to be able to give other people. Yeah. But how did I get to the awareness? Because I'm asking you and asking me, how did I get to the awareness that this is worthy? How did I become dedicated to it? And I don't know the answer. I don't know what triggered.
Okay, good. I'm glad you don't think I'm psycho for not knowing.
No.
I don't know.
I thought you could help me.
When I realized the worst thing that ever happened to me happened somewhat outside of my field of view, somewhere outside of my awareness, I truly didn't see it coming. No, I'm not saying I didn't notice that it was getting worse. I'm saying somewhere in my psyche, in my intentionality, was an absence of awareness that the math result of my words and actions were as harmful to my wife and to my marriage as they were. And I think truly that is the condition that most people are experiencing. If they're the one that's doing whatever they're doing that's resulting in harm for the other person.
Yeah, most people don't get to that step though, Matt. They stay blaming their partner because they're the outlier and the only person who's upset with them. For some reason, you're a lovely guy, everyone likes you. It was only your wife who was banging on you. So, but you still made that step, and that's, so maybe just enough, it was enough for us to talk about this. For anyone who's wondering, should I look at myself and my role in my relationship deteriorating? Maybe just this conversation was enough. If you're getting feedback from your spouse that they're sad, they're unhappy, they've got concerns, it's real, no matter how much good feedback you're getting from your friends and family, no matter how much validation you seek elsewhere. If you are getting feedback, it is worthy of your attentiveness and to learn some different skills.
Well, and unless somebody truly believes in their infallibility, their impeccability, I mean, I would think about it in the context of like business partnership, and imagine that two people enter a business together and one person has flaws. They're only there and only effective as a business partner 85% of the time. And that 15% bothers you, but you're only effective 65% of the time. Yeah. And I don't know, or vice versa, but whatever. It's like, here's the way that I think about it. I think maybe it's a trash analogy. So many guys come back. I mean, they say, well, what about your wife, Matt? What about all of the things your wife did that you didn't like? That is so commonly the feedback from the manosphere, if you will, which is tends to be where my criticism comes from. And I don't know how, with intellectual honesty, to evaluate. And I say this to every client I work with that's angry at his wife, frustrated with his wife. I'm like, how can we fairly evaluate what they bring to us in our marriage while we're dishing out negativity? Let's eliminate the pain that's a math result of what we do. Let's take that off the table so that we have a clean, scientifically, mathematically pure framework for which to evaluate what the other person does. And that's still not accounting for years of betrayal trauma, potentially. If like we're 10, 15 years into a marriage, we still have to deal with old wounds. But if just imagining you could somehow magically make it a clean slate. Let's start where we take off the table everything that mathematically results in pain for that person. Then let's evaluate what they do. I posit my wife would not have done anything that I disliked in the context of jeopardizing the relationship. There might have been pet peeve things that all humans have that you accept lovingly when you choose someone that make them and not someone else. But truly harming to me of the relationship, she did so little of that. And what she did do, I say, is 100% in response to things I could have mitigated. I could have stopped doing or prevented had I only been aware and or accepted responsibility for it. Okay, so let's do one of my favorite parts of your book. And it's, first I want to read something from the book because I just love this. And this will segue us into, until your partner demonstrates beyond doubt that they can articulate accurately your point of view, you can safely conclude that they don't know how you really feel. Let's just put that on the screen for anyone watching this on the video. This is that's what I just said is appearing in captions on the screen. That I love that. So let's talk about validation or not validating and use that as our benchmark. So for anyone who's watching this in a relationship and it's not where you want it to be, that quote is our benchmark. Until you can state their views as well as they can, or ideally better, you don't know how they feel. And think about that. You want to be in a relationship, an intimate relationship, and you don't know how this intimate partner feels. And you're not pursuing that with curiosity and openness and a sense of hunger to know. Anything less than that is you are selling her short. You are diminishing her. You are inviting her to self-abandon and to settle for less because you didn't pursue knowing her heart's truth. Anything less than that, you're about to learn. How can a person, my favorite question, I think, is how can a person trust you if you don't even know truly? And I don't mean, you just don't know. It's like, it is innocent in the context that it would all be accidents. But how can a person ever trust you with their well-being if you fundamentally don't know all of the things that provide positive experiences for them versus all of the things that provide negative experiences for them.
Yes.
And be able to predict with some semblance of accuracy what those things are. If you don't know, that makes you a threat every single day of your life to inadvertently cause harm, or at minimum to be unable to mitigate it as life's happening at you, like with you. That's why you don't appear safe or reliable or trustworthy to your relationship partner.
Yes.
But then to invalidation. And then, so this happens all the time,
well,
right?
Hang on. Can I just add something to that?
You get to do anything you want forever. Yeah.
You're so sweet. I just love this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's not just if you don't know, you've probably been told and you didn't remember.
Smart.
And that just cut her to her soul. And I could cry saying that, Matt.
Yeah.
You got told. This is whoever's watching. She told you 1,000 different ways, her list, and you still acted like you don't know. There is a difference between ignorance and then there's willful ignorance. And wake up if you're in the willful ignorance category. Because you're a threat. You're a massive threat to her well-being, to her safety, to her joy, to her well-being, to her inspiration, to her being who she wants to be, and you're a threat to her growth. You're literally standing between her and who she truly is. She can't be her when she knows you know and you still disregard it.
That's a really important caveat, and I really appreciate it because it is critical, and it's true. It's so true for me. The ADHD is real that I experience, and so there's this part of me that wants to like make excuses for how maybe I don't notice a detail that somebody shares with me in a story, or that I don't remember that they tell me on Monday this thing's happening Thursday. I am so prone to forgetting that on Thursday they asked me 4 days earlier if I could do this thing for them. It's such a common in my lifetime experience for me to like lose track of that. And the work that I've done is I understand how critical it is that I don't do that, because it communicates you don't matter. It communicates I matter more than you. So my adjustment with how I manage calendars is so tremendously different. I'm still a threat once in a while to like butcher something, but I'm really good compared to what I was a decade ago with my calendar management, because I value a human being not feeling as if they didn't matter enough to block out time to prioritize. And that's the difference between me yesterday and today, metaphorically speaking.
Well done. Good on you. Well done. The self-awareness. I hope everyone's just really digging this. And the other thing I'll say to anyone who maybe can relate to this, that they don't know the list of their partner's needs and wants, desires, and preferences, is this. If you can name the footy scores and the footy teams from 1972, you can know the fucking list. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if you can name the codes from work from top to bottom in alphabetical order of whatever job you do, if you can name every person on your team and describe their families, if you can describe a football team, if you know who won the grand final in some year, you can know this. This is willful. This is a choice.
Thank you. That's really well said. No, it's really well said, because, my friends and I could get together and recite, little cheat codes on Nintendo from when we were, 8 years old, and remember stats from football players and basketball players from, decades ago. And then we claim ignorance, which is real, but I accept strongly and lovingly the word willful negligence, willful ignorance. It's a choice. Love is a choice.
Yes,
and
it is.
I have to make that decision every day. It's not just things I can say. So you asked about invalidation.
Let's do it.
It's my favorite thing.
It's my favorite.
Here's why and I want to talk about, if I may, for 1 second, why it's my favorite. I believe by volume, I believe it's the thing that occurs the greatest mathematically number of times. Therefore, it's the simplest, easiest way to start restoring trust in your relationship.
Yeah.
Because it happens more than anything else, if you stop doing it and you start validating intentionally, so many positive trickle-down effect things will happen next, I believe.
Yes.
So I really think of every moment of invalidation as one of those paper cuts that I mentioned earlier. Yeah. If I invalidate you, I've just paper cutted you. I've eroded trust in the relationship. I've caused you to trust me a tiny bit less than you did before. And that's not going to jeopardize my relationship today. And it's not going to mean we can't have a good time 48 hours from now. It just means if this is the continued course of action for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you are not going to have the requisite level of trust in me. You're not going to feel as if our relationship has the necessary amount of safety for you to want to stay in it. It's going to just, for lack of a better term, feel bad every day. And you're not going to trust me when like life is hard. And I just think it's sort of that simple to think about. So mechanically, what does invalidation look like? The way I talk about it is I think it disguises itself as harmless disagreement, which is what's so, I think, scary about it is even when we learn about invalidation being harmful and somebody might accept that, you still have to do the work, the mental work of becoming aware that the math results of a conversation I might have with somebody can equal, again, intention doesn't equal experience, such a beautiful, beautiful, simple statement. My intention to honestly disagree with you and not to hurt you, not to invalidate you, may still equal harm and invalidation. And so the work is the mental work of changing our habit of invalidating if we do indeed have this habit. I think habits
Can I just add also, being right will lose your wife. And it doesn't mean you're going to be wrong. The way we're going to explain it, you'll realize you don't have to be wrong. But if you think being right is what matters when your partner brings an upset to you, if you think it matters to be right and to correct her, you've lost her. So you've just got to decide what's more important. Her feeling loved, validated, significant, belonging and safety, or you being right again. And you very well could be right. But if that's what you think you've got to prove in this interaction when she's upset, you're losing her. Time after again, she is learning to stop turning to you. The Gottman Institute calls it bids, emotional bids. I'm sure you're familiar. Every time they come to you with an emotional bid and you turn away or disregard it or minimize it or diminish it or deflect away from it or in any way make it wrong, they are learning to stop coming to you with bids, and eventually you'll have silence. So be right and lose them. That's the choice you're making. But we're not talking about being wrong. Over to you, because I think that's so important, because men get so upset about being wrong.
That's right.
It's not about being wrong.
It's not, and we'll get to that if you'll grant me the monster into the bed thing after this. Because it's the way. Because so many people ask me, like, Matt, how did you stop doing that? Well, that was how. And we'll get there momentarily. So this thing I call the invalidation triple threat. It is the low-hanging fruit thing I believe I have to offer the average man that comes to me, the average human that comes to me in a relationship in which they believe they're the ones doing things that are inadvertently, in their estimation, harming the relationship. It is, I believe, my greatest crime. And in the context of, not my greatest crime, but you know what I mean? It was like my biggest blind spot. It's the thing I did the most often by far. And I'm so pleased that like I see it now and that I don't do it. So the invalidation triple threat is simply, in my estimation, the 3 distinct ways I believe somebody frequently invalidates their relationship partner. And it happens when we disagree. I like to point that out to the guys that I'm working with. I'm like, you agree with your wife, with your relationship partner? Very often they say something and you just agree, and then nothing bad happens. You show up as supportive and loving and respectful, and it's great. The harm is when something's communicated to you that you don't agree with, and that's where the work comes in. And so what it looked like in my marriage was my wife would come to me and she would say, hey, Matt, some bad thing happened. I'm experiencing it in a bad way. It's hurting me or something. A bad thing happened. I feel bad about it. And version 1 of the invalidation triple threat was I would disagree intellectually with what she said occurred. Like I would try to reframe the story, be like, wait a minute, that's not what happened. What happened was this other thing. The math result of the response of my wife's wrong, therefore she's not allowed to feel bad, is exactly that. Is your feelings are invalid because they're based on something that didn't even occur the way you interpreted it to occur. You're mistaken, therefore your feelings are inappropriate for the situation. Invalidated, right? So version 1. Version 2, my wife would come in the room and she'd say, hey, Matt, the bad thing happened. I feel bad about it. And this time, intellectually, I'm 100% with her. I strongly agree that that event occurred exactly as she said that it did. But now I'm confused as to why she's having the emotional experience she's having. Like, wait a minute. you shouldn't be feeling that way. I'm like, why are you making such a big deal out of this thing that doesn't matter very much? And I would now try to sell her on, your brain's totally right, but your feelings are wrong. Your emotional calibration's a little bit skewed. Why don't you try to fix it like mine? Like, right, like I have the most superior, I have no idea why I thought like the things I thought and felt were like universal truth for how humans should behave. No idea why I thought that. Super entitled. There was no data to support that like things I think and feel should be the thing other people think and feel. And then third version, and I think this is the most dangerous one, is defensiveness. Is my wife comes at me and says, hey, Matt, a bad thing happened. I feel bad about it. And I would be like, wait a minute. This is why I did this. Let me explain what I thought was happening or what I believed to be true at the time. And now you won't be mad at me anymore. If you know what I knew, I won't be the bad guy. You won't feel bad about this. The reason defensiveness, I think, is so dangerous is because just like versions 1 and 2, we're invalidating the emotional experience. We're saying you just experienced harm and I'm not expressing anything that indicates I care that you're experiencing harm. That's in my estimation, sort of why the invalidation is painful. But why I think defensiveness is so frightening in the context of trust erosion is because we eroded trust by invalidating them with defensiveness, by caring more about what we feel than what they feel.
And our reasons why they're wrong.
Yeah,
that's
we
the
imply
important
we'll
thing.
do it again. Well, right, we're
I've
making
got great
the case.
reasons. I've got good if you knew my great reasons, this would all be working out.
Yeah. Doesn't that not imply we're going to do it again in the future?
Yep.
I'm a threat to do this over and over again for the rest of your life because of how justified I was in doing what I just did. Yeah. My wife comes at me and says, I was harmed by something. And I'm like, well, sounds like your problem. Let me explain why this is so genius. People have every reason to believe we're going to hurt them forever when that's how we show up.
Yes.
So again, my math analogies, what I talk to the guys that I'm talking to about are here's the math of this invalidation habit. What someone learns after several years with us, maybe even sooner, is that 100% of the time, all of the time that my wife hurt, but I didn't agree that she should be hurt, that I didn't rubber stamp it with Matt's seal of approval. She was left. She was left to hear, I will always choose what I believe, and I will always choose what I feel, even if it results in harm to you. I will always choose me over you on matters of disagreement for the rest of our lives. And I hope people can understand why trust and feelings of safety might erode in an environment in which that is the condition anytime there's disagreement between two different people's mental and emotional experiences, which, by the way, occur multiple times a day sometimes. Like, which is why this is so dangerous. I understand how small a simple disagreement with another adult might seem, but when you communicate, I'll always choose me over you, you are setting yourself up for an awful relationship and or one destined to end.
Yes, well said. And one of the things you talk about in your book, this is for anyone and please get the book, page 45. Your partner is coming to you for 2 reasons: to help you become aware of the thing that hurts them, and 2, to recruit you in cooperating with them to move forward and to help her with the hurt now and to prevent the hurt in the future. That's the intent. However it's said, whether they're crying, angry, nagging, none of that is the important thing. For this conversation, they're attempting to help you know, alert, I hurt, and hey, help me so I can feel safe in the future because right now I'm feeling pretty shaky. Yeah. And then you respond with telling them they feel wrong, telling the intellectual reasons why it wasn't that big a deal, or pointing out all the great reasons why it went that way and you should just be more understanding. And you wonder why they don't trust now, and you wonder why intimacy is eroding. You can stop wondering. It's right in this conversation. What I'd love to do, and you haven't done a podcast before, and if you're not up for it, I totally am fine for that. Can we role play the crappy version and then role play how to validate well? So people who are,
I will see. We'll see if I can live up to the things that I talk about. I'll do my very best. So, are you playing the role of the invalidator or the person that's coming to me with a pain?
I'll be the wife.
Okay.
But I don't mind which way we do it. What suits you? What would you
that'll
prefer?
be fine. I'm well practiced at trying to convince you that your feelings are wimpy and stupid. I've done that a million times.
Okay, let's do the crappy version first. So Matt, I'm really hurt. You said you were going to pick some stuff up from the shops. You said the same thing last week. You were late both times. I'm just really sick of having to carry all the load around here.
Sorry, we're role playing.
Yeah, you got to
Sorry,
suck.
excuse me. Yeah, this is hard. I have to act.
You got to suck.
I'm going to try really hard. All right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hear you. It was a long day at work. It was a long day at work both days. Things have been crazy. We're on deadline. I get it. I know that I said it to you before, but I wish you would kind of relax about it. It's not a big deal. It's not like if we don't get this done in the next 3 days, some major calamity is going to befall us. Everything's fine. I also don't appreciate the fact that I'm like busting my ass at work so that our kids can like go to university someday. And then you're going to give me shit about this like little ass thing at the store. It's nonsense. And it feels bad. How about no? How about you relax and realize that it's not that big of a deal, and I'll get to it as soon as possible. Okay. Next week, we're past deadline. I'll take care of it. I'd probably say some bullshit like that. You didn't negate my feelings, but you intellectualized it and you defended. So you did 2 out of 3. So you were reasonably terrible, but not as terrible as you could have been. I was not a tyrant, I promise, but I did that constantly.
Yeah.
It must have been really frustrating for her because she knew that I was like a pretty nice person, but she's like, you're not nice to me though.
No. Yeah.
She was right. But I would also challenge her on that.
Yes.
When she's like, you're not nice to me, I'm like, that's bullshit. I married you.
Yeah.
I give you
what more do you
everything
want?
I was a special boy. Yeah.
Oh, honey, I'm not doing this to make you feel bad. No, that role play didn't have to be what was in your marriage. So it really was just for people who are watching. That's how not to do it. And now I'm going to do a version of bad validation that looks good. Are you ready for this? So you're going to bring the complaint. So go ahead, and I'm going to do a validation that's really ineffective, is going to diminish you and deplete you, but it's going to look like it's pretty good. So if you could complain, please, that'd be lovely.
When we talked this morning, you said you were going to be home at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So I went to the supermarket. I made your favorite dinner. And now it's been sitting here and it's 50 minutes later and it's fossilized. And it feels bad because you told me something and then you didn't follow through with it.
I'm really, really sorry. That's my bad. I'm sorry you feel that way. I really am. It's the worst.
So
I'm
you feel
sorry.
That way.
This is really appalling. And it sounds so like if you do this and we're laughing, we're not laughing at you. It's just, we know the harm this is doing to the recipient of it. It is really harmful. I'm really sorry you feel that way. That must feel terrible. You're right. My bad. I should do better. You're dead right. I should have done better. So that looks good and really ticks bad, you might think it ticks boxes, but it doesn't tick any boxes, because what I have just done is moved entire responsibility of this event to you. I have taken no responsibility. I've implied your feeling. What I've said is, when I say, I'm sorry you feel that way, is I'm sorry you feel, full stop. It is literally saying, I'm sorry you feel. Think about how depleting that is if you're watching this to the person on the receiving end of that special line. I'm sorry you feel, and I'm sorry you feel bad. It's almost like I hit you with the pen and it leaves a mark on your hand. I'm sorry you got a mark on your hand. Well, no, actually you put the mark on my hand. So where is you in this equation? Yeah. That it's leaving you completely out of how this is happening to the recipient of the hurt. It's go ahead and feel bad.
I did it. The implication is, I'm sorry for your weak, sensitive feelings. That must be such a difficult liability for you to carry around every day. That you're so hypersensitive to all these things that don't matter to the rest of us. Yeah. I'm sorry. That must be so hard. Like that was not honestly as awful as that, but same vibe, same energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
So now let's do it better. Let's validate the feelings, the intellectual experience, and not be defensive.
I'll
Do you want
try.
to take
Is
it
there
away?
any chance we could do, well, I was wondering if there was any way we could do like the same one we started with.
That's what I was going to suggest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that one. So I'll just say roughly what I said, but it's exactly that one. And we're just going to do over and we're going to attempt to bring ourselves closer together.
And I will answer it, I swear, as I would answer it today.
Perfect.
Hoping that that's a nice model, but I'll trust you to steer me another way if it's not.
No, it'd be beautiful based on what's in your book. Let's just do this. So I think what I said was, you were late and you said you were going to pick up things for dinner. I'm really disappointed. We talked about it. You said you'd do it. You did the same mistake last week. I'm tired of having to repeat myself.
And yeah, and how I would answer that today is, I'm so sorry I did that. And because I understand that for the entirety of our relationship, you've asked me to do things and I've failed to do them. And that might indicate to you that I don't care what happens when I come home and I don't have the things that we agreed to get, that it didn't matter to me that every time I come home without the things I promised you, that I broke a promise, that I betrayed your trust, that I indicated that the things you want, think, and feel, and that my commitment to you, like, doesn't matter. I don't know. This is not a great one, but what I would do, forgive me, I'm so shit at role playing. I'm so shit at role playing. The thing that I would attempt to communicate, I'm not an actor. The thing that I would attempt to communicate is I would care so much about that dish by the sink conversation that we had before. I would care so much that me coming home without this stuff was a piece of evidence that you didn't matter. It was a piece of evidence that you present so small in my world, intellectually and emotionally, that you weren't prioritized. That everything in my life that I'm experiencing at work and in my own thoughts and feelings matter so much more to me than you. That's what that communicates. When I continue to come home over and over, is it a promise that's the end of the world? No, it's not, right? And it's so easy maybe to get stuck in defending yourself and minimizing it and trivializing it. But the truth is, it's not about that. It's not about how intense of an emotional experience or how intensely harmful it is to the sanctity of our marriage. What it is I've once again demonstrated to you, I've given you solid evidence that I am a threat consistently to not care enough about your wellness, your mental and emotional experiences, you experiencing me as giving a shit about what happens to you because of the things I say and do. Like, it's really that simple. I used to not care about what I cared that she didn't feel pain, but I didn't accept responsibility for, on the other side of the equal sign, for my words and actions, pain was experienced, right? I was so stuck on intention. And then, right, I didn't intend to cause harm by not going to the store. I am so busy at work, I just forgot, and I'm sorry. Have you not forgotten anything before? I mean, I don't yell at you when you forget things, is some crap that I would have said to my wife, when the truth is, I didn't have this long history of being not considered by my wife, but she had a long history of not being considered by me. So the emotional experience of me forgetting something versus her forgetting something were not apples to apples. They were not equal, right? It hurts her because it repeats the narrative. Yeah.
In rooms where I have men and I have the partners, the intimate couples, oftentimes the man will say, but I'd never get that upset. And I always say, but they're consistent enough that they can let you down once or twice. 90% of the time they do the thing and they're there, and you don't even have to notice that they're there because it all just happens. It's invisible. So you barely notice if it doesn't happen because it's not that big a deal, because it barely ever happens. You are dropping the ball how often, in how many areas of her life that matter to her, or not even knowing that they matter to her. That is the corrosion, my friend. That is how you're losing her. It's not apples for apples that you did it once and she did it once. There is this history that you keep bringing to her. And I would argue, and I really would, it is different for women who, in traditional evolutionary sense, there's enough evidence in evolutionary psychology that the feminine energy of support and caregiving needs to know that they're going to be safe. It literally is. When we gave birth, we were helpless. When we raised children, when they couldn't walk, we were helpless, and we had to just guard and help our children live. Evolutionary, that's done something, which means the man had to have his eyes out, hunting, protecting, and watching. Just bring that to this conversation. The man and the woman needs to know that he will protect her. So when she can't protect herself and she has to protect her child, he will do it. But if you don't show up all those times when it's the little thing, she's just thinking to herself, you can't be trusted on the big things.
Of course.
That's what happens. Yeah.
No, of course.
So
that was me, a serial invalidator.
Yeah.
I did that. And I believe in a mathematics way that if you were able to have a spreadsheet of all of the things that eroded trust in our relationship, by far, the biggest number of them would live under this invalidation column. They aren't necessarily the most harmful, but I think the collective is the most harmful. And I just think it's such a powerful, like, sort of insight and thing to consider, to notice in your own life. And so we talk about that, and a lot of guys come back at me and they say, Matt, what do you suggest? Do you suggest agreeing with my wife even when I don't agree with her? And I say, no. I said, we're trying to restore trust in relationships here. Being intentionally dishonest does not in any way restore trust in the relationship. You're conflating agreement with validation. You don't have to agree with your wife at all in order to validate the lived experience she had. And then I cycle into my thought exercise, if I may.
Yes,
do we have time? Okay.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. It's just the one that works. And so many men have been like, yes, I get that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the thought exercise I concocted in my brain, and I don't know even how it happened. It just popped in there one day, but it is the one I in my own life leveraged to remember to not invalidate people with whom I craved trust and healthy relationships with, is more or less every human, more or less. But it's so critical in our close interpersonal relationships, right? I can't emphasize this enough. It's not bad. It's not evil. It's not immoral. It'll just mathematically result in trust erosion, which will destroy your relationship. So it's a choice. You can defend yourself on the merits of being high character, or you can make a deliberate choice to change an action habitually in order to, like, keep trust maintained in your relationship. And I just think it's a critical way to think about it. My son is 13 now, but he used to be 4. And when he was 4, he was a threat to wake up in the middle of the night crying, afraid of a monster hiding under his bed. I hear wailing, right? And I sprint up there and I open the door. And he's like, Dad, I'm afraid there's a monster under my bed. And my brain instinctively wants to convince him there's no monster there, because it is the most efficient route to, just on my default, it's the most efficient way for him to stop feeling fear and to stop crying. That's how I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to sell him on the idea that there's no monster there. But the way that I would have done it is I'd open the door. He tells me, I maybe sort of half laugh. I'm like, dude, there isn't a monster under the bed. So, like, the reason you're afraid isn't real, and you don't need to be crying right now. It's a gross overreaction to what's actually occurring. You're fine. Everything's okay. Be my big boy. Toughen up. Stop crying. Everything's okay. And if I'm being like this, really, by the way, this probably isn't literally what I would have done, but I just think we've all met somebody who would say things like this or experienced it in our own childhoods. I would have been like, I don't have time for invisible monsters right now. Go to sleep, because, I have more important things to do right now, like go watch a football game or go back to bed myself or whatever it is that I want to be doing. Once again, this is not a big enough deal for me. I'm choosing me over them. Is ironically the theme of this. But I think it's so critical. And then I leave. And I like to think about the math results of leaving that child in that situation. I'm correct, right? Like, I'm correct. If there was a judge in the room, the judge would award me the person that was the most correct about the facts. There isn't a monster under the bed. That's true. I love my son more than I love any human on this earth. I could not love a person more. And I would never behave in a manner designed to inflict harm on him, ever. I would never do that. Despite those truths, what's the math result of the way I just encountered that situation with my son? I say he still feels fear. He's still crying, but now he's alone in the dark. And he just learned that if dad doesn't think the thing that matters to me, that's adversely affecting me, matters, dad implies that I'm stupid or crazy or weak. And then he abandons me, literally or metaphorically, to cry alone in the dark. That's how dad responds when I tell him something bad's happening to me and he doesn't quite agree or he doesn't quite approve of the way that I'm feeling or acting about it. That's what dad does. And so what I'm saying to people listening to this is that the quality score, if you will, if there was some way to measure the quality score of your relationship with a human being, it just suffered. It just mathematically went down after you talked to your kid that way. They trust you less. It had nothing to do with whether or not the monster was there or not. It had nothing to do with the degree to which you loved them. They might know you love them. They might not doubt your love for them at all. They don't trust you as much anymore. And so now I think a child like that with a parent like that grows up and does not invite dad, does not maybe invite mom, if she's the same way, to be part of like the hardships that they'll encounter in their teenage years, maybe with bullying, with being offered drugs, with being in uncomfortable situations with romantic partners or whatever happens for teenagers out there that's a little bit complicated that we as parents might want access to, might want to know about in order to like love and protect our children the best that we can.
And then we get to say, why didn't you tell me? You only had to come to me and tell me. Well,
every time they've tried in the past, they only feel worse afterward.
Yeah.
And so I can't emphasize enough that in this metaphor, I'm not in any way trying to equal an adult with a child. This is not about responding to an adult like a child. To me, it's just such an easy way to think about whether correctness and loving someone really matters for whether trust and safety exist in a relationship. I think it's so easy to see how somebody could stop trusting you, even though you're right about the thing that exists, the condition. So what's the alternative? Well, for me, I hear my son crying, right? And I want to like find out what's wrong. And I open the door and I find out he's afraid because there's a monster under his bed. And I know there's no monster there. But I also know if I try to win the battle of ideas with him, if I try to convince him he's mistaken right now, I'm going to lose trust, which is the thing that I need most to make my relationship safe and whole, which is required for my partner to feel loved, for my son to feel loved. I need this to exist. And I know this now. Today, I've done the work. I'm intellectually aware. So I've built the habit of, I know my instinct is to convince him there's no monster, but I also know harm will be caused if I do it. So I'm going to do something else. And I'm going to turn the light on and I'm going to sit on the edge of the bed and I'm going to hug my son. And I'm going to say, bud, I don't really think there's a monster under there. However, I've been afraid before. I know exactly what it's like to be afraid of things. And it's one of the worst, if not the worst things you can ever experience in your life. And I'm really sorry that that's what you're dealing with right now, because it's awful. Let's turn the light on. Let's look under the bed. Let's make sure there's no monster there. And I think the most critical idea is this. I'm not going to leave. I'm going to stay right here until you know your house is safe, your bedroom's safe, and you feel comfortable going to sleep again. Because the most important thing is not getting back to the ball game I was watching or getting back to bed. I have prioritized my relationship with this human being. It really matters to me. And it's a choice. People might not care about their marriages, about their parent-child relationships, and I won't judge them. That's fine. If that's honestly what you want, fine. I'm not going to judge you. But if you truly claim that your wife, that your children, that your spouse are the most important people in your life, this is the work. It's about choosing them sometimes over whatever is the most easy or comfortable thing. I'm not going to abandon my son to cry alone in the dark. Not until, because what I value is not him knowing that there's no monster there per se. What I value in the context of my relationship is him knowing I will show up time after time after time when he's afraid, when he's sad, when he's angry, when something bad is happening to him. I want to be the person. And I ask every relationship partner, boyfriend, husband, don't you want to be the person? Don't you want to be the person she comes to when life's hard? Like, or do you want it to be the attractive coworker? Do you want it to be someone else? Even if it's her mom, her sister, her best friend, do you really want to be 4th, 5th, 6th place on the list of people she chooses when life's hard? I want to be that person, like desperately. I want to give that gift to my romantic partner. I hope the analogy is super obvious to people.
Fabulous.
It's not about whether the monster's there or not. It's so easy to have that debate with somebody. I know it's not there. You're overreacting. And I'm saying harm is caused when you do that. And you can have a debate about how logical you think that is. But I'm saying there's a soft relational skill about being present with somebody. You talked about this idea of like crawling down. I forget the actual place you named, but I saw a Brene Brown like animated video on empathy once, where like an animal walks down this ladder into this like underground cave to sit with their other animal friend. And it was the first time I was introduced to the value of just sitting with somebody in the pain, in the dark, while they're in some midst of suffering, because I want you to know I'll always be here for that. You never have to feel, this is the thing I'd say to my son that correlates with like this adult conversation. Buddy, I never want you, I could always call dad. You can always call mom when something hard, when you're dealing with something bad in your life. And we might not be able to fix what's broken. We might not be able to fight your battles for you. But you never have to feel like you're the only one. You never have to feel alone in the scariness, in the fear, in the anger, and the sadness. That's the gift I want to give that I think grows trust, that grows intimacy, that grows safety in a relationship. And the equivalent of that in the adult years, and it's the way, as you know, that I open the book, is I want to be the person that jumps in the hole with my friend who's trapped down there. Yeah. I don't want to walk by and with well wishes and say, I hope everything's okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry you feel that way.
I'll worry about you. I want to jump in the hole with that human being. And they might think it's stupid that I jumped down there too, but I want them to know they're not alone. And I want to know that I might know the way out, like, because I've been down here before. And that's the work of empathizing with a human being, of not abandoning them to feel whatever shit thing they feel like by themselves. And so, right, I love the metaphor because it's so easy for me to go back to in later conversations with the same human. I'm like, remember, it's so easy to fight about whether there's a monster there or not, because it seems so irrational to be afraid of something that you don't perceive to be real. But there's a value in that person's experiencing fear right now. Can you behave in a manner that mathematically results in them feeling less afraid and increasing the amount of trust in you? To me, that's the habit. That's the work. And I practice it over and over and over again. And that restores trust in relationships, in which trust has been eroded incrementally over the years. And I don't know. I just think it's a very simple but powerful idea.
One of the things that you talk about in the book is trust is more important than love. And I want to give an example that we started the conversation with to give it full circle. One of the things I said at the very beginning was, it's when your partner is crying, sobbing on the floor, you don't stand over them and wonder what's wrong. Let's talk about what you do instead. And I'm going to take the first step. The first step is you go and sit with them on the floor. Stop acting like it's a big deal. Stop standing over them. You literally look right now cold-hearted. You might not be, but you look cold-hearted. You look like you don't care, and you look like you are clueless about how to care for this person you're supposed to care about the most in the world. Get down on the floor, not opposite them, not near them, right next to them, and touch them. It's called co-regulation. They are not able to regulate their emotions right now. If you could just touch them a little bit, if they'll let you, that will calm their nervous system, and it will start creating some communication. What would you add? Because I think this getting down in the pit with me is everything for me, because that's the person I'm going to trust. The person who stands over me, I'm not going to go to them again when I'm feeling that messy.
Thank you. You just taught me the word co-regulation, and I'm gonna look into it more, because I'm always trying to evolve my vocabulary. And you'd mentioned overfunctioning earlier, which is I just learned that yesterday. Like, I obviously knew what it meant, but I didn't have a word for it. Yeah. And just like codependent relationships, there's just so much of that. And my wife probably was an overfunctioner, and I was an underfunctioner. Yes. So she reinforced my behavior, but if we're going to pick on her, by continuing to do for me things that I needed to do for myself. And it took her a really long time to start enforcing her boundaries. And I took it really hard and moved into a gas room like a wimp. And she, that portended the end of the relationship.
For anybody in this relationship, and this is a lot of couples, if you're the overfunctioner and what you just heard is scary, many relationships end when you stop overfunctioning. that is true. Statistically, literally. People, when you start enforcing healthy, functional, respectful boundaries, think you're mean because they're so accustomed to you rescuing them, they don't like you changing things. It is a tough journey when you retire from the role of overfunctioner. But on the other side of it, and this is where I want to be very hopeful, it is hard, Matt. It is hard when you resign from that role. I am a retired overfunctioner, but it's tough. I literally lost relationships and got called mean. I got called a bitch. How dare I? All I did was say, from now on, I'm not going to be quite as available with that. I can't believe, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
So it's hard and it's harsh because everyone's accustomed to you and gets a lot out of you acting a certain way.
Emotional vampirism.
Yeah.
We do. And I've learned to recognize it in people, and with my friends and people, I've really tried to help encourage them to enforce boundaries. What I learned from reading a little bit of Harriet Lerner's work was the idea of incrementally, the healthy way to preserve a relationship, but to start enforcing boundaries when you're the overfunctioning partner is to very slowly, incrementally step away from all the doing and the rescuing. And that could show up right as laundry and cleaning up after somebody. And right, it happens all the time. And it happens in parent-child relationships too.
School lunches, who picks the kids up from school, who has to notice that we don't just get to watch the footy all weekend, but we need to go to the park for the day. It's all those little things. The thing I was going to say was it looks hard in the beginning when you do it. What helps is what you're left with are the healthy relationships.
That's right.
You do get to then relations, because a lot of people are overfunctioning, Matt, live their lives feeling underappreciated, underloved, like they don't matter, like no one's going to care about them. So the good news out of doing this work, because I want to balance out the conversation now, because we've been, talked a lot about this person who's had to be rescued and now needs to rescue themselves, but the person who's been doing the rescuing, the good news is if you slowly start withdrawing that over-functioning, you stop being the caretaker, however you want to get there, it can be incrementally or it can be harshly. If you want to do anger, you do anger. You might have earned the right to your anger. However you do it, on the other end of that is healthy relationships. That's the good news.
It's a beautiful idea. I'm really glad that I did the ADHD tangent there, but I'm sorry also that I did it because you asked about what it looks like to sit on the floor next to somebody.
Yes.
And touch them, and the co-regulation, which I assume means I'm going to share in the emotional regulation.
Yes.
That you're struggling to manage yourself, right? Because I care about you. I'm with you. I'm in the cave with you. I'm promising my child for the rest of their life, when something bad happens, you can count on me to show up for you. I can't necessarily fix what's broken, but you don't have to feel alone in it. And so that's to me, that's the gift. What you said, Matt, like, how do you think about it? I didn't recognize it in my relationship, but I recognize it so powerfully now. The gift you're giving somebody in the context of safety and trust is this consistent promise that when life is hard, you will not have to suffer through the hardship alone.
Yes.
I communicated to my wife through a series of thousands of words and actions, or the absence perhaps of them, throughout the course of our dating and our marriage, that communicated to her when life was hard, I was not going to sit in the dark and be uncomfortable with her if the situation didn't organically discomfort me the way that it discomforted her. That is what I always showed up as. I don't like discomfort. I'm going to go ignore it while you deal with whatever you're dealing with over here. It might not have sounded in real life as harsh as I just made it sound, but it doesn't matter. On the other side of the equal sign is abandonment, is neglect. And safety and trust go away when that happens. And so the work is preventing that safety and trust erosion from occurring in the first place. And I just think it's so powerful. And full circle to the conversation about my father-in-law passing, that he passed and it was so hard for her. And I did share, I promise, in the discomfort of that. I was personally, it was my greatest personal loss at that point in my life as well.
I'm sorry.
Her father's loss was the closest human to me that had ever died suddenly in my life. And so I was dealing with it also. I loved that guy. We had a great we had a great father-in-law, son-in-law relationship. It was amazing. And same kind of guy probably. And probably, but I think it's different when it's dad versus your husband.
Yeah.
But what, right? She'd had a decade of data that says when bad things happen to me, my husband is not a source of comfort. My husband is not a source of not feeling alone, of not feeling abandoned. The math results of talking to my husband about this hardship that I'm feeling, this sadness that I'm feeling, this fear that I'm feeling, the stress that I'm feeling, about what's going to happen with my mom, about how we're going to handle everything, about how finances and medical stuff, and about moving out of that big house that she can't take care of by herself. The math result in the past of recruiting my husband to try to help me be part of the stuff that's hard for me has never resulted in me feeling better, ever. He's not invited to be part of this.
Yeah.
This is the hardest thing. This is the most sensitive thing I've ever encountered. I'm going to keep some emotional distance now. And that's when I noticed, like, that's when the change happened. But I understand I'd never given her reason to let me in, ever. And so the first really, truly significant hardship she encountered, she was only going to let the safe people in. And I didn't know how to think about it like that back then, but now I get it, like, so clearly.
I get it. That is so powerful. Thank you. It's really, I really hope viewers have got that message. Are you the safe harbor? Are you the person they turn to? And if they can't turn to you for the little things, when it matters, they're probably not going to turn to you then. Is there anything else you'd want to share? I've not covered 7 pages of notes, but
that's hilarious. No, I'm here for anything that you want to talk about. For me, my favorite thing to discuss is the invalidation part of it, because it feels like the low-hanging fruit opportunity to restore trust. But at the end of the day, if you don't do the work on the consideration side, the idea of I do the mental work of always, not sometimes, always, including my romantic partner, into my decision-making, always calculating for how they will feel when X, Y, or Z things happen. And if you start being notified about blind spots, I'm open to the idea that you truly don't know, because that was me. The work is next time it's communicated. Now, if the light switch just turned on somehow, that you have blind spots around things that communicate, I'll always choose me over you, wife, because I leave this glass here, because I leave toothpaste spittle on the bathroom mirror that you work hard to keep clean, or whatever. It could be any number of things. The toilet seat's a popular one, up or down, right? It's not a big deal. And so many guys are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she gives me trouble. It's how hard is it to like do that motion? Well, it's not hard. That's not what it's about. She can handle it. She can absolutely handle it. She's not saying, I sure hope a big, strong man moves the seat down for me. She's saying it's so hurtful to be forgotten or discarded intellectually, mentally, emotionally, every single day of my life like this. Like that I'm just not thought of, that I'm not a person who lives here. That's what that communicates to me, that I'm not, and that was one of the things that I did well. I did a lot of stuff like that I perceived to be thoughtful. But I was the only metric that mattered. My, like, does this matter versus does this not matter? Yes. I didn't invite my wife's value system to factor into the work I did to calculate for her. And that is the great change that needs to occur. And you don't have to agree with your romantic partner. You don't. And if you have a conflict of values that are just irredeemable and you can't be with that person anymore, that's a really hard place to be. And I'm really sorry. And those are difficult choices for people to make. Really difficult, but I still want to encourage people to accept responsibility for partner selection. It's a part of personal growth and all of that. But on the flip side, like, even if someone's hurt by something you think's ridiculous, and the best example I could offer would be like a fatal nut allergy, or like a medically significant like gluten allergy, which is something I've had to learn in my personal life. Spend a lot of time with somebody that's, got a gluten allergy. And if I don't calculate for the breadcrumbs, for the sandwich that I was holding, and then the doorknobs, and I sanitize doorknobs and refrigerator handles and faucets, before she shows up, because I don't want her to get sick, if she's going to come over. Like, I think about that now, that's something I might not have done in the past. And I just, right? We can give a peanut butter cookie. I know that peanut butter is less popular in Australia than it is in the United States, but we can give a peanut butter cookie to a child with the best of intentions because we want to give them a cookie. But if they have a fatal nut allergy, we're putting them in harm's way. It's the way to think about the harm we cause in our relationships, completely separate from what our intentions or even what our like awareness might be. The work is to learn and to be vigilant to protect the people we love from experiencing something that's bad for them. It's just truly that simple. But it's remarkably easy to not accept responsibility for when you're young and think you have a real handle on right and wrong, good and bad, which I did.
I don't think it's just about age. One of the things I want to close on is anyone watching this, it's not about whether you're right or wrong. It's not about blame. It's not about fault finding. It is about how great a beautiful, loving, wonderful, intimate relationship do you want to try and achieve in this lifetime? That's it. Doesn't matter if you don't think if you're using the word fault or blame, you're already in trouble. You're already sinking because the moment you use that language, you're looking to apportion, it's on them, it's not on me. Dump that language of right, wrong, good, bad, blame, fault. If you dump that language and all you're left with is how close does this person feel to me? You have your answer. Because if they don't feel close to you, if they don't turn to you when they feel sad, if you find them getting resentful or grumpy, you're on the path to demise. No matter how righteous you think you are, your relationship is dying. That's it. And if you really want this relationship to work and you care about it, dump all what you think they're wrong about, the fact that they criticize you, that they attack you, that they yell at you. If you stop worrying about that, and I'm speaking now specifically to men, because the power, the profound power of you seeing that as a cry for help and not an attack is life-changing. They are crying for you to get on their team. So if you can just stay there and not give in to your fears and not run and not turn away and not try and make them wrong, and you stick and lean in and say, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. Give it all to me. I can handle it all. Whatever you've got, bring it. If you can do that enough days in a row for the rest of your life, one day you'll start undoing the harm that was done every time you didn't do it. And it won't happen overnight. It won't happen in 1 day, 2 days. It won't happen in 3 weeks. It probably won't even happen in 12 months. If you've got 20 years of damage, put in the yards. That is a level of relationship betrayal that is going to take a lot of undoing. But if you really want intimacy, you do it until she leans on you. The moment you see her become soft and lean on you and lean into you, and her face becomes soft and she feels gentle with you, you did it. You turned the tide.
Yeah, no, I think it's beautiful. That's what we work on. That's all my coaching is exactly that. Can you consider perpetually another person's needs, know them, predict accurately what they need, and then meet them with consistency, and then validate when somebody communicates harm has been caused. If you can do that consistently over and over again, I believe so strongly that we can come back from the dark places. It doesn't guarantee they'll choose us because we've caused a lot of harm and there's a lot of betrayal trauma. And so the work can't be attached to a partner specifically. The work has to be the work because you want to have healthy relationships across the board, no matter what. But hopefully, exactly what you just said, it's such a beautiful, hopeful message. And it is like the end game in the context of restoring relationships. And something I really like to talk about is there's all these pain points from the past, the fights that keep coming up over and over again, the pains that keep being mentioned from 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 13 years ago. And it's so frustrating for some people to keep, because so many men are like, I don't keep a notebook on all the bad things that I experienced 10 years ago. It's like, she keeps this. I'm like, it's a pain point. It's a betrayal trauma. And I'm like, if you can learn how to succeed in validating and earning trust, you get to go back. You get to go back and like re-examine that moment with your partner. And I'm like, you may not be able to like completely wipe the slate clean, but I'm like, you can heal it. I think in the way a therapist can help a person heal a trauma, you can get damn close to like restoring trust from all of those like back incidents. But first, let's demonstrate that we're a safe human being to like be vulnerable with and connect with today. But I just, to me, that's the path to trust restoration. And I only know how to think about it in this like regular guy version. I like that you bring like intelligence and academia to it. It helps me to learn, right? To learn like vocabulary words.
I love it.
Thank
I
you.
love it. This has been amazing. I really feel I've sold our audience completely short by about 2 hours. There were so many things I still want to dive into. We might have to do this again if you're available at some point.
You're
it's just
one of the most delightful humans I've ever spoke with. I would love to whenever you decide down the road, if you'd like to make time for that, that would be really cool. Because then seriously, I don't think I expressed enough gratitude at the beginning. I was too busy deflecting. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. Thank you. It's so beautiful. And just to the viewers, please get this book. I've got the media release version, but the screen, if you're watching on the screen right now, the actual book cover will be shown. Could you show the book cover? Yeah, I do. I believe you guys are getting this version.
Show me.
Australia is this version.
Wonderful.
And that's awesome. Thank you. I'm so sorry that you don't have a physical copy. When we'll discuss fixing that.
That's so good. I'd like a signed copy at some point.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, we'll do that immediately.
Yeah. But if you haven't yet got the book, and I hope you have, we have, would you believe, in 2 hours touched the surface of this topic. There are notes everywhere that I've got post-it notes everywhere that we haven't covered. And it's just a beautiful deep dive into a very personal story. This man's revealed with such poignancy and truthfulness how he hurt himself. And that's how you end the story, not to give too much away, but that this is how you hurt you. And I really appreciate, and I know everybody who reads this book and listens to this is going to appreciate how you shared. And hopefully it's a lesson and an inspiration of how we can turn towards the lighter side and a more inspirational side for our partners. It's wonderful.
I really hope. I don't want people to feel attacked or blamed. I want them to feel as if this is a warning, but hopefully, I mean, ominous if ominous works for you, but it's a warning that things that you don't calculate to be bad, hurtful, harmful to your partner or to yourself may very well be occurring just outside of your field of view. And I really wanted the book to be, pay attention to things you maybe haven't been paying attention to, because that's where longevity in your relationship lives. That's where emotional wellness lives. Nobody ever taught me, and I don't want to, again, pass the buck. It's on me. Nope. But
you can.
I think a lot of people weren't taught. A lot of people weren't taught.
I learned it. I wasn't taught it. And my mum wasn't taught it. And she's amazing at it now. She's unbelievable. She's off the charts at it. It's all learnable at any age. If they're hurting, just for everyone who's watching, if they're hurting, you can go and help them. You really can. Don't just watch them hurt and feel helpless. Learn how to help. That's the message. Now, I want people to find you. Firstly, go to your site, which is matthewfray.com.
It is.
And read your blog and read about a younger man from several years ago who was not as articulate as he is today, but was very, very passionate about what he did. And this is really how Matt began the journey. He wrote this blog, and one blog you can go and read called "My Wife Left Me Because I Left the Dish Out." Is that it?
It's the same. She divorced me because I left dishes by the sink.
It's had 4.6 million reads. That's
just on my site. Yeah, a lot more in other places, I think.
Yes.
But yeah, just on my little blog, it did that. That's amazing. It is.
Yeah. And it's worth visiting. But also, I think your coaching list is now full. But how could people get in touch with you? I assume there's a group program coming very shortly.
I hope so. I have to figure out what that looks like and how to execute it. I don't pretend to know, but I think that's the answer to like meeting demand at this stage. Because I don't want to not show up for people, but it is starting to get a little mathematically complicated. Via matthewfray.com, you can find in the classic website spots, the social channels. You know, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, and I've just started a really low budget YouTube channel that only has like 6 or 7 videos where I am beginning to try to just share the ideas that we've talked about today in, 5 to 10 minute increments.
Yeah. So I recommend the book, This Is How Your Marriage Ends. I really do recommend though, going to Matt's site, like I did, hanging out, reading his blogs and getting involved. If his message appeals to you and you realize that he's like every other person who has blundered and not meant to make these mistakes and meant well and intended well and has now learned. If you think hanging out with a guy like that could help you in your relationship and your future relationships, get in touch with him at his site and get involved with his group program. I know his coaching program's all filled up now, but definitely worth, man, if it gave your relationship a 2% better chance, Matt, it's worth it if you love them. It really is.
So,
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. This was great. I'm so appreciative of the opportunity, particularly I think you accommodating whatever time it is there. I think this was more convenient for me than for you. Thank you.
It's 10 p.m. now. I'm usually in bed an hour ago, but I got to talk to Matthew Fray about a subject that I adore. So what does it matter? What is the ideal community for us to live in? What would we value, avoid, encourage? Because I don't believe enough of our leaders are thinking about it. And because if we don't focus on it, we're going to get whatever the most dominant voices decide for us. For every person who asks this question, 5 answers can present themselves. But it's still, I believe, a worthy question. And the answer is important. My answer to the question goes something like this. The ideal community would teach love, compassion, and respect. My name is Sharon Pearson, and I'm here to share how to discover, awaken, and connect with the truest you, leading to a happier, more fulfilled life. I'm going to bring my experience as an entrepreneur, coach, author, and creator of mindset models to make life way better. Join us for open-minded discussions on how to live your fullest life when getting by seems oh so easy to achieve.